So we wanted to make a little video all about you're going to make an offer. What do we need from you? What's going to be in the offer? What are all the different terms that we can talk about? This is basically a way for you to get up to speed on what the offer process is like and the offer preparation and presentation process.
Yep, just a little bit. We talked about doing some homework ahead of time so that you would be prepared, and ideally you'll have a chance to sit down, go over your paperwork. You might even want to ask for a blank copy of an offer so that you can read through that and see if anything jumps out at you, because again, in the market that we're currently working in, you are not necessarily going to have a couple of days to process that information at the time you find the house.
Yeah, it's always nice to get a blank copy of your offer and just like stick it on the nightstand. There's a lot of fine print in there. It'll put you right down.
And then, if you're going to get advice from your friends or your relatives, get that all out of the way ahead of time so we can answer those questions. And that's not in the heat of the moment. But we do need a few key pieces of information when we're writing an offer,
right?
That we need you to come prepared with, or we need to have the ability to get.
So it usually goes down in two ways, right? Either clients, buyers come into the office and we're sitting across the table and we're writing the offer in front of you and we're asking you questions.
Right.
Or maybe you're in different states or you're at work, it's all happening so fast and we need to get some information from you, prep the offer, and then scan it off for you to sign electronically. This can happen two different ways. But no matter what, we're gonna need
some key questions. So we need to know who you are.
What is your legal name?
And what's your legal relationship? Because you
this
need
part
to know.
can get really juicy.
Yeah, and sometimes if we've just gotten to know each other, it's like,
Sometimes, and this is an important one, I've had someone who was making an offer and then they say, oh, well, I'm married.
Oh, by the way,
I mean, we're not really married anymore, but we're just technically married.
we're in the middle of a divorce.
This is important information for title insurance, and like that person is going to have to, unfortunately, be a part of this transaction. They're going to have to sign off on you're buying this house.
Or you're unmarried and you're purchasing a home together. We need to tip the title company off onto how you're going to take title. And title is a whole nother conversation.
So ask us.
Yep, and because we're going to ask you, so be giving that some thought ahead of time. There's some obvious things that go into the contract, where you live. One that came up, though, I was writing an offer for someone, was their address. And they said, well, is it where I'm living now or where I'm moving to?
I always say, where do you want your mail to go to during this transaction?
Yep, but we will want address, email, the escrow company. So that's the neutral third party that helps move the money around and execute the deed that transfer title between seller and buyer. They're going to need to know how to reach out to you. And in a timely manner, they're going to be delivering some documents to you that you need to get and receive. So make sure we have the best way to get to you, whether that's snail mail or email. Big one, though, is the earnest money.
Yeah, so a lot of people are like, wait, what's the earnest money again? Is that my down payment?
Right.
This is the only damages the seller can take from you if you violate the contract, which of course you're not gonna do.
Depending on how the contract's written.
Right, good point.
There's two options. There's a forfeiture of earnest money or seller's election of remedies.
We're never gonna check that box.
Typically, it's the earnest money. It's contained to the earnest money. And so there's a lot of protections for a buyer.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that surprises buyers, right, is that the earnest money check gets deposited. So you write the offer today, they sign it tonight, and that check gets deposited right away.
It'll be held by escrow until closing.
And it's a credit towards your down payment or your closing costs. I mean, it goes in as a credit on your balance sheet there with the escrow company. But be prepared for that cash to come out of your account and stay there for the next 30 to 45 days until the house closes.
Yep.
So we'll talk about, when we're preparing your offer, what's a good amount for that earnest money.
I always heard, traditionally, earnest money was 1% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $300,000 house, $3,000 of earnest money looks serious.
But in a market like this,
In a hot market,
there's an opportunity sometimes. Your earnest money can be one of your points of negotiation. So we'll see people maybe putting 2 or 3 times the norm down on a property they're making an offer on.
I think especially if you're trying to compensate for something in your offer that's maybe not so awesome, compensate. Well, I mean, if
you're wondering where you were going.
Yeah, if you're trying to compensate for maybe you have a 0 down loan.
I've got a big earnest money check.
Goodness, it shows. So you're trying to compensate for a 0 down loan, and the other people that are writing offers on this property, they've got the big down payments.
Yep.
But maybe you making your earnest money more shows them that you're more serious. You have something to lose. You're not going to flake out. You're not going to let it fall apart. You're very serious. That's what you're trying to communicate.
The common phrase I hear from the sellers is, I want to know they've got some skin in the game.
Oh, yeah, they say that a lot. Why do sellers always say that?
We need a new catchphrase in the business.
Do.
But I mean, that is their idea. Part of it too is even if you're writing an offer with a fairly sizable down payment and you come in with the minimum earnest money, the question is, do they actually have the cash on hand? And you can determine that through some other avenues. But when you put a big earnest money down, you're saying, I have this cash and I'm willing to have it deposited and held for the duration of your closing. So that's a good thing.
I think a lot of listing agents, especially agents who've been in the business a long time, like they're very concerned about vetting the buyer. And just any kind of evidence of actual money is always very reassuring to the agent and to the seller. You know, because when you're the seller trying to choose from many offers, you're trying to figure out who looks like they're actually going to get this done. It might not just be about who's offered the highest price. It might be about who has their stuff together. And part of that is the responsibility of your real estate agent
To pitch you.
To pitch you, to fill out the contract correctly, like using someone experienced that knows how to put the offer together in an attractive way, but your terms are the next battleground.
Well, and one of the key terms, especially in this marketplace, so in 2015, we wrote a lot of deals and saw a lot of deals that had 30-day closings. And then on October 1st, everything changed due to some financing regulations. And now we're regularly seeing 45-day closings. Or somewhere in between, known as TRID. And it didn't cause the trauma probably to you as a buyer that it has caused to all of us in the industry. But there's two big impacts, and the biggest one is the closing date. So we're going to rely on your lender to tell us what the time frame is. If you're coming to your agent with a lender that they didn't suggest, you may need to have that information when you come forward to write your offer. So have that conversation with the lender.
And hopefully before it's gotten to the time where you're writing your offer, you've introduced your lender and your realtor, because we need to ask the lender some questions. First of all, what type of loan? And we'll often get the response from a buyer like, I'm putting 10% down. And that doesn't actually answer the question for us, because you could be getting a VA loan, an FHA loan, or a conventional loan, and you could still be putting 10% down on any of those. So we need to talk to your lender to find out the type of loan you're getting, the down payment amount you're putting down. If you need closing costs, that's something that we have to write in the offer if you need the seller to pay that. And if you're in a competing situation.
And not just in the offer, but I mean, when you're going out to look at houses and you're talking about, oh, hey, by the way, I am going to need closing costs to purchase something. I mean, letting your lender connect directly with your agent so that they can have a good conversation around what you're going to need to actually
how long they need to close, like if there's anything. I just had one come up last week where the buyers were like, we can't close before X date because there was an employment situation that was part of the pre-approval. So they're totally pre-approved, but they can't close before a certain date that makes their contract a little longer. So these are all things that we need to know up front so we can prepare the offer.
Yeah, so that's a really huge one is when can you close? When do you want to close, but also when can you close, per your lender. So again, knowing that you might be writing a deal at 6 o'clock on a Saturday, if you can't reach your lender on the weekend, then you really need to be sure you're discussing that ahead of time.
And also, if you can't reach your lender on the weekend, that is going to be a problem in a hot market.
In this market. There's another term relating to dates and timeframes, and that's possession. So we have what we call closing. We've got another video about from contract to close and what happens in that time period. But there's the closing date and there is the possession date. And often closing is when the money changes hands, the deal records at the county, and the deed says that the buyer is the new owner. That's the official closing date. But sometimes in a market like this, or any market really, the seller maybe has negotiated a little time to move out of their house. So their possession date will be 5 days later. Or maybe you need special terms. Maybe you have to be out of your rental at the end of the month and your lender can't close until the 10th of the following month. So there's two different dates that are going to go into that contract. Think a little bit about what you're going to need to be able to perform and just to live.
Well, and if you are in a multiple offer situation and you're the buyer, if you can offer the seller a little more time to move out, sometimes the seller is also trying to find another house and they might also be in multiple offers. So the more flexibility, sometimes flexibility is more important than money.
Yep.
And these are opportunities for your offer to stand out. And definitely ask your agent about that. Is that important to the seller? Is that an area we can be flexible?
Right. Right, that can be a negotiation point. Maybe when you think it's all about money and there's really other terms in your offer that can be helpful.
One example might be shortening your inspection time frame. So one of the things that I'll often do when it starts to look like a client is going to write an offer, I'll start texting my home inspector and just be like, when's your next available appointment? And I'll just pencil us in case we win. And he's been really great about letting us do that. But the shorter we can make that inspection period, it shows that we're not looking to tie up your house for 2 weeks and then not close. Like, we're going to do this in 4 days or 5 days and, let you know if we're in or out.
And these are key terms that we're identifying and you're potentially committing to, because if you write an offer and the seller signs it as you've written it, you now have a binding contract. And there's some various contingencies that can get you out of that. But essentially, we need to know who you are and how you're going to take title, what the time frame is for closing. Obviously, you're going to have a discussion with your agent about the price that you want to offer.
And there's 2 conversations about price. There's the price you want to offer, and if you're in a multiple offer situation, there's the price you're willing to go up to. So there's the price you want to pay, and then how much are you willing to pay?
And before you say, maybe I'm not going to tell my agent that, there's another line here on your contract that is really key, and it has to do with who your agent represents. And this is something we've spoken on pretty candidly, but on that line, your agent has to check whether they represent you, whether they represent the seller, or whether they represent both of you. And you might feel a little more confident telling your agent what the difference is between the number you want to offer and the number you're willing to go to when you understand that your agent has specific duties to you and representation only for you.
And 2 points on this. The first point being, your agent should only be representing you. You should have an agent just for you, looking out for you, who owes you all those duties.
Buyers and sellers.
So that should go without saying. But if for some reason, for whatever reason, you don't trust your agent and you don't feel like you can tell them how much you're willing to go on a house, if you don't have enough trust to have that conversation,
that could be a red flag.
That you don't have the right agent. I know I shouldn't say things like that, but this is a basic thing. You need to be able to trust this person. If they haven't earned your trust, or if you're just not feeling it, start over.
That's a good sign. So, go down that checklist. Those are just a few things that you can prepare along the inspection. That's, one of the items you're going to use, a form you're going to use. How soon can you do that inspection? Be prepared to spend money to do that. So as you're putting this offer together, you're thinking, all right, I'm going to write an earnest money check. I'm going to pay for a home inspection. I might need to pay for a sewer inspection. And these are all costs and decisions that are going to come very shortly after you write this offer. So
hopefully this conversation has you feeling excited and ready to write your offer, or at the very least ready to go ask your agent a few more questions before you write your offer. But this is what it takes to win, and that's what you want.
We just want you to be prepared.